You are.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to part 3 in this series about innovation and combat adaptation going on right now in the Russo-Ukraine war. So the first presentation was by Professor Don Bretzman, who presented on robots and drones. 2 weeks ago, we had Dr. Chris Paul, who presented on deception and decoys. And then today we have Professor of Practice John Hemmerer, who is here to talk about both conducting warfare and defending yourself against missiles in the Russo-Ukraine war. John is both a retired Navy captain of a great distinguished career, and then is also currently a professor of the practice leading the Meyer Research Group and the Meyer Scholars here at NPS, which he does under the auspices of his role as the chair of Integrated Air and Missile Defense, a chair sponsored by Missile Defense Agency at NPS. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Hemmerer, who will talk to us about missile warfare.
Thank you, Colonel Pugh, and thanks to the staff of the Captain Wayne Hughes Naval Warfare Studies Institute. Quite frankly, I think one of the most exciting, best professional development programs, as well as research and many other things that we have here at NPS. So thank you. It's great to be with you here today. Lots to cover here. So let's jump right in. So can we have the next slide, please? Are you good, John? Indeed, today's thing will give you a little idea of what we do in the Meyer Scholar program. So I mean, the equations are important for combat systems engineering. They're very, very important, but we talk about a lot of other things, right? In the context of the bigger picture. So Rear Admiral Wayne Meyer is the father of Aegis, and the reason why we have all these wonderful Aegis cruisers and destroyers and Aegis Ashore and all that is because of Admiral Meyer himself, a graduate of the Naval Postgraduate School, just like many of you are going to be here very soon. Let's go to the next slide. And so today it's all about Russia's missile campaign. Say here is that there's no shortage of information on the internet, and some of it is actually true. But so I ask you to kind of take what I say with a little bit of grain of salt, because it's a rapidly moving kind of development that I'm going to talk to you about here today. So to a little bit of a grain of salt, because it's difficult. It's really difficult to ascertain ground truth on this stuff. Let's go to the next one. Anybody know? Anybody here from NSA or? No? Oh, yeah. Clausewitz. Yeah, of course, Clausewitz. So it's kind of like, okay, so doing well on the question. The answer, but anybody seen Sound of Music? Sound of Music? Yeah, Sound of Music, right? So Julie Andrews, what an actress, a singer. What'd she say in Sound of Music? Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Well, let's start with Clausewitz and Clausewitz's observation that, war is politics by other means. War is politics by other means. That's the first thing we need to know at the beginning. The other part to remember is, if you think about it, his kind of focus on the primacy of the objective, how important the objective is in warfare. The other thing I should also say too is this deals with the second part, and it is that you think about Captain Wayne Hughes and what he said about tactics, because a lot of times we're here working at the tactics level. He says, to know tactics, know technology. So we're gonna talk a little bit about technology here. Let's go to the next slide. Clausewitz. What's the objective? Strategy. So the strategy, I think, for Ukraine is to make sure that they retain their sovereignty, to make sure that they survive. This is all about survival. And you've seen the pictures, you've heard all the talk, you know, these people are in it. It's like life or death, life or death. Make sure we preserve Ukraine, glory to Ukraine. Next slide. So, time for another question. Who is the senior Ukrainian air defender? Anybody know? Anybody know who's the senior Ukrainian air defender? Let's go to the next slide. This is the senior Ukrainian air defender. You know, because when you look at this Wall Street Journal film with President Zelensky talking, here's what he says. Everybody knows that any counteroffensive without air superiority is dangerous. That's like the Integrated Air and Missile Defense Commander talking. And he is certainly at the strategic level. Let's go to the next slide. So this is what combat systems engineers do, right? They think about solving the operational problem. And in this case, the operational problem that Ukrainian senior air defender is thinking about, and his lieutenants, is how to achieve air superiority. How do we do that? Because if you don't have air superiority, remember what he said. You want to do a counteroffensive without air superiority, that's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. Reason why we have officers here at the Naval Postgraduate School studying things like physics, like operations research, like electrical engineering, stuff like that. They're the ones who balance both the operational problem and the technical solutions. Next slide. Admiral Meyer says that it's important to get the terminology straight. So when I talk about air superiority, this is what I'm talking about, right? You can read it as well as I can. But I want to make sure that everybody understands when you talk about air superiority, this is what Joint Publication 3-01 says. Notice that it says, or it does not say, that you can't have any ordnance dropping on the objective. It doesn't say that. It's kind of like sea control. Everybody has been to the sea control lectures here, maybe in some class, maybe in JMO, and you know, like sea control, right? It's like impossible to have absolute sea control. It just doesn't happen. Think about this, right? End of the war, USS Indianapolis. It's the end of the war. It's like April 1945, right? They just dropped the atomic bomb off at Tinian. And they sortie from there on to the next mission. What happens? Japanese torpedo finds them and 700 sailors. Right, so it's the same thing in air superiority. It's not that you have to exclude every piece of ordnance from dropping on the target, but the predominance has to be that you can still conduct your operations in the face of it. Let's go next. So here's really kind of like the gist of part one of this little discussion, and it is from this great article from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Right, it's a think tank in Washington. They're very well renowned. They happen to have a thing called the Missile Defense Project there. And they've got, as you might expect, lots of senior retired flag and general officers there who have really been in the business for a long time, and they've got great researchers there, do good work. They put together this article called Putin's Missile War. Now, this article is like 50 pages long, and we just don't have enough time to go through every bit of it. But I want to go through the condensation of it and kind of give you an idea, a background of how all of this fits together, you know, at the strategic level, coming down to the operational level of war, and then ultimately to the technical and the tactical. Number one, strategic effects. Strategic effects that Russia was trying to achieve, not achieved. This is a major thing. You know, if you think about the Germans going into Alsace-Lorraine, right, in the beginning of World War, just really early part of World War II. Like they really didn't have the forces required, but they marched into there. And then they marched into Poland, and they marched into France and a whole lot of other places, right? And I think that's what the Russians really had in mind. Didn't get it. It didn't get the strategic effects they were looking at. The other thing too is, and you know, I gave this presentation for PC 4022, Naval Combat hearing this morning, 9 o'clock. And the question I asked them was like, hey, why do you think the font there is like in bold and darker? Why do you think? Why do you think it's bold? Why do you think it's darker? Over to Joe.
Bold number 2.
Yeah. Why did I make it bold?
You could say it affects bold point number 1 and wasn't realized because of.
Yeah, and you know what? So, but you have to wait for the real answer till the end of the lecture, right? But you remember this. Look at this slow targeting cycle. So think about this, right? The Ukrainians are really getting schwacked. They're up against the whole Russian army. What do? They disperse, they get mobile, and they deceive, because that's really kind of the only thing they kind of can do. Oh, of course, they've got offensive and defensive, but you know what? Does this sound familiar? We'll get to it at the end of the lecture.
Well, I think one of the things about that article, though, said that unlike the US in Iraq, where, you know, there was kind of this quick decapitation,
Yeah.
that has not, as you say, has not been achieved.
Yes, and so when you think about this, like, what's the first thing you want to do? You just want to survive, right? The key is survival. You think of like Vietnam, like how long did those people survive? Like North Vietnam, Vietnam War. Like all we got to do is hang on. Step number 1, survive. And the way you can do that is like this. Russia clearly underestimated the goal. They understated the underestimated the amount of effort required to make this happen. Right? And I thought they're just going to waltz in. Not so much, because those Ukrainians are tough. They're very, very tough. And maybe there's a lesson for us in toughness from the Ukrainians, what they've been through. And then, please put your hand up if you've had joint maritime operations at the Naval Postgraduate School or somewhere else. Yeah. So you know what they talk about space, force, and time, right? How do we characterize the operational environment? Space, force, and time. Look at this bullet. Too many targets, too few missiles. Too short a period. Space, force, and time. You know, you kind of wonder, you know, did Putin graduate from the Naval War College? Apparently not. Let's go to the next slide. So a couple other things here. Yeah, so take away after the infrastructure. Well, of course, number 1 is because the infrastructure doesn't fight back. Power plants do not fight back. Air defenders do fight back. Infantry divisions fight back. Infrastructure does not fight back. And oh, by the way, if you're trying to break the will of the people, it's easier to break their will. If they're cold, they have no power, they have no water, they have no internet. What would we do if we didn't have any internet? Oh my gosh, we'd probably capitulate. Go after the infrastructure. The other thing too is that we've increased the dependency on the West. Now there's good news and bad news about that, but the increased dependency on the West. They can't survive without the West. And what they want to do is also exhaust the patience of the West. Like, you know, like United States. We've already done this thing about going through war for 20 years, right? Iraq, Afghanistan. Yeah, we're getting kind of war weary. That's what they tell you in JMO. But you know what? 20 years of that, here's somewhere else. I mean, like, can't we just call it a day? You know, if we have to give away Ukraine, but we're tight. Next. Again, back to attacking the infrastructure. And you've seen these pictures before. But there is good news, right? There's been increasing success on the part of Ukraine in dealing with these air attacks, air missile attacks. Things are kind of looking up, and now we're going to kind of take a look at in a few slides why exactly that is. Next. How big is Ukraine? Anybody know? How wide is Ukraine? How wide do you think?
1,000 kilometers.
3,000 kilometers. I hear 3,000. Do I hear 2,000 kilometers? Do I hear 2,000? 2,000? 2,000? 2,000 kilometers. Do I hear 1,200 kilometers? Yep, 1,200. That's it. 1,200 kilometers wide. 1,200 kilometers wide. How many miles is that? Order of magnitude, kind of like 72. Sure. Partial credit at least. Pretty big country. Like, this is not Gaza. This is not Gaza. There's a lot of territory out there. The other thing I direct your attention to is the key. Now, you may not be able to read the key up there, but essentially it's squares and circles with dots. And those circles with dots and squares tell you how big the cities are. So you're probably familiar with Kyiv, right? So Kyiv right here, it helps to be 6'7". And Kyiv has a big red square, and that means that there's more than 1 million people in Kyiv. And you've heard about this. How do you pronounce this? Lviv. Anybody know? Yeah. Pretty far away. Now, if you think about like Russia being over here, I don't know, what's that, like 600 miles? That's a long way. That's a long way to bring ordnance from Russia all the way to there. So a big thing. Next, Space Force and time. Now let's take a look at the same country and how much ordnance has been expended by Russian forces. You're familiar with Donetsk. The Russians for a long time have considered Donetsk to be theirs, not Ukraine's. And so much so that they invested in July of 2022, like 1,200 missiles there. That's a lot of ordnance, but look at the rest of the place, right? The rest of the place over here, 58, 2, 17, 1 for a country that's like 900 miles wide. You've got to expend a lot of ordnance if you want to significantly impact infrastructure, if you want to significantly impact the military forces, if you want to impact the population. That's a lot of ordnance. Heck of a lot of ordnance. Next slide. Remember, I'm here for the Meyer Scholar Program. Did you think I was not going to put a slide up without Admiral Meyer on it? The other officer is Vice Admiral John Hill, another distinguished graduate of the Naval Postgraduate School. Both of them, consummate combat systems engineers, because the second half of this is about combat systems engineering. They say combat systems design always begins with the threat. If you're not considering the threat when you start your combat system design, and like, you're probably not going to get what you need to have. So let's talk about the threat that the Ukrainians are dealing with. Next slide, please. You know, a couple of weeks ago in the Meyer Scholar Program, we had a threat brief. It was 50 minutes. Oh my gosh, it was 50 minutes worth of like incredible detail, ranges, altitudes, velocities, warheads. Like, man, that's a lot to digest. So look, we're in lunch hour here, right? So we can't digest that much stuff. We'll get into digestion. So let's just kind of keep it high level, right? These are the kinds of missiles that the Russians are using, as you might expect. They're ground launched, they're air launched, they're launched from the sea. And they got a ton of these missiles, but some of you may be familiar, like undoubtedly all the surface warfare officers know about the Caliber, right? And the fact that Caliber is sea launched, and the fact that, you know, you're supposed to use this Caliber for anti-ship missile. It's an anti-ship missile. Talking about innovation, guess what? Whatever this ordnance was designed to do originally, the Russians are saying, you know what, now I want to use it to destroy Ukraine. And if it was supposed to destroy missiles before, like, you know, or it's supposed to destroy ships, not really worried about that now. I want to destroy power plants. I want to destroy schools and hospitals and apartment buildings and all those kinds of things. They're not too much worried about like we are, right? If we use Tomahawk, we want Tomahawk to go through the 3rd-story window that's in 3 windows from the edge. That's the kind of precision munitions. Russians not worried about that. Really not worried about it. No, if it's ordnance and it goes a long while and explodes, that's good enough. Good enough. Another thing that's kind of problematic is this one here, the Shahed 136. Now, you can't really see the details on that, but one thing you should know. Yeah, that's the Shahed 136. Yeah, you're on. Yeah, absolutely right. Full credit for that one. got a lot of these things, but what the little detail here is, that's where the propeller is, back F. Propeller's back there, so you know, propeller, and that's kind of slow. They got a lot of them. Just roll in. The good news is, do you really think we have to send a Patriot missile to take care of one of those little? No, we don't. And that's kind of good for the Ukrainians, and we've got a solution to that one. You know, you can't see this slide here very well, but if you could, you would see that it kind of looks like, you know, we had some sheet metal workers put it together. It kind of looks like aluminum sheet metal. It looks like it's got pop rivets in it. It's just not very, it's just not very stealthy, right? If you take PC 4022 and you learn about radar low observables, and you know the interaction of electromagnetic energy with things like bolts and seams and all those kind of things, you can pick that missile up like a million miles away. That missile was actually developed in like the 1960s. Does that give you an idea about what the ordnance inventories of the Russians are and how desperate they are to put ordnance on some target, even if it's just close, right? So they're throwing a lot of stuff. This one, by the way, right here, this Iskander. So in PC 4022 Naval Combat Systems Engineering today, we talked about the fact that, you know, like, this is a ballistic missile. It's a ballistic missile, which means probably hypersonic too. So when you see this stuff in the press about, ooh, the Russians fired hypersonic weapons at the Ukrainians, right? You need to be critical thinkers. You need to be critical thinkers. Do we really think that Russia, you know, in many cases, a third-rate industrial kind of country, in many cases, they're going to have the same hypersonic weapons that maybe the Chinese or eventually us going to have? Maybe not. So see, the terminology is really important, and critical thinking is important. You really need to think about, when they say hypersonic, what's that mean anyway? Of course, you know that it means more than Mach 5. You know, we've been dealing with more than Mach 5 for a long, long time. Anybody see Apollo 13? Apollo 13, right? They're coming back. Right? Come back. Ron Howard do a great job. Coming back. It's got all the flames around there, but you know, because you're at the Naval Postgraduate School, they're not just flames, right? It's plasma. And the reason is, of course, because it's going more than Mach 5. This is the inventory of the problem. Look, have you noticed this one yet? From back there? If you haven't, it says S300, S400 for students of the operational art and tactics. You know that the S300, S400, you know, what kind of missiles are they? Anybody?
Air defense missile?
Yeah, they're air defense missiles. Full credit on that. They're air defense missiles. So what's going on here? They're not using these missiles, which were originally intended for air defense, to shoot down stuff. They're using it to put on hospitals, apartment buildings, schools, and other places where the population lives. Okay, next slide. I've just spent a large number of minutes telling you about the operational problem. Now we need to talk about the technical solution. And the technical solution, the innovative solution that desperate people are using, is something that the chief air defense officer of Ukraine calls Franken-SAM. Franken-SAM. So now we get into the innovation part. Franken-SAM, like Frankenstein's monster, right? And SAM, surface to air missile. Because why? Why does he want that? He wants because he must achieve air superiority. If he doesn't have air superiority, then the strategic objective is at risk. Next. Students of naval history will recognize this. It's a plot from the Naval Battle of Okinawa. I think you all understand Naval Battle of Okinawa is very, very important to us today. And the reason is, of course, because it's kind of the same situation that we face in the South China Sea. Okay, it's in Okinawa, right? Yeah, they did have cruise missiles in Okinawa. I don't know if you know that, but they had cruise missiles. It's just that they called them kamikazes. And our Navy was a heck of a lot bigger at the Naval Battle of Okinawa. Anybody know how many ships we had? Naval Battle of Okinawa? 400? I hear 4. I hear 4. I hear what? Yeah, 12. Yeah, the answer is something like that, order of magnitude, like 1,000 ships, 1,000 ships. In 2 months at the naval battle of Okinawa, 300 of those ships either sunk or seriously damaged. 5,000 sailors dead, 2 months. That tell you what it's going to be like in the South China Sea. The other important thing is you see all this disposition of forces, and that's because of layered defense. This layered defense thing is so very, very important. Layered defense, layered defense, layered defense, right? It's just like a cascade builder. Mechanical engineers are a cascade builder. This is so fundamental to warfare. Layered defense is so fundamental to warfare. Guess what? Even the Missile Defense Agency today, with all our advanced technology and stuff like that, still uses layered defense. Next slide. If you're unfamiliar with the concept of layered defense or defense in depth, this is a really good article. It's from the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory. They're the guys that came out with the variable time fuse for the 5-inch projectile, which was really good for air defense in World War II. Because before, if you can imagine, we were using a mechanical time fuse. Hey, where's the target? Where's the target? Oh, it's going to be there in a couple of seconds. Okay, set the mechanical timer. You're just like an egg timer. Well, this is before we had microwaves. But we used to have these things called egg timers, and they were like a mechanical. That's the same thing was on the fuse. Johns Hopkins is a federally funded, it's a university affiliated research center. And one of the things they do better, probably than anybody else in the world, is air defense. They looked at layers. Next slide. Let's talk about defense in depth. It's pretty simple, right? It's pretty simple. Outer layer, area layer, self-defense. Outer layer, put all the aircraft out there. That's why we have naval aviators, so they can do outer air defense. Put them in the Capt, the Combat Air Patrol, send them way, way out there. Send them out 200 miles. And what they don't get, then you let the cruisers and destroyers take out with missiles. And then if they don't take them out, then the next thing is self-defense, right? So that's where the close-in weapon system is used. Things like that. Defense in depth, layered defense. Next slide. So let's go through this slide in detail. Nah, just kidding. The only reason I have this here is to make sure you understand what is kind of like common sense has deep, deep foundations in mathematics. So if you happen to be in operations research, you know these equations. You work them out like Captain Wayne Hughes, trying to understand. All this is embedded in mathematics. Next. When you talk about this layered defense, it's defense in depth, like take them out one at a time. It turns out that Ukraine's done very, very well using this approach. And the reason is because they've prevented Russia from using their stockpile of iron bombs. How many iron bombs do you think Russia has? Golly, they got iron bombs going all the way back to World War II. These are not precision-guided munitions. These are just big, fat, dumb bombs. And they might be 500 kilograms or 1,000 or 2,000, but they got all they can't use them. Can't use them because remember, if you want to go to a lot of the cities in Ukraine, you got to fly a lot of miles. The only way you can do that is with an aircraft. The aircraft can't get through. Why is that? Because of Ukrainian air defenses, augmented by Western air defenses. This is a big. This is what's going to keep Ukraine alive, because if those iron bombs don't get there, then guess what? Then the hospitals survive, the people survive, the soldiers survive, everybody survives. You've got to have air superiority, and they've done that with defense in depth. Next. What are they going to protect? Or I should say, why? Why are they going to protect, right? Because if you don't do this protection, you don't achieve your strategic objective of survival of the nation. The other thing too is if you don't do the protection, then the commanders don't get to have freedom of action. All of you have taken either School of Life or Joint Maritime Operations. Understand the commander must have freedom of action. No freedom of action, then the enemy dictates what you do. You can't go where you want to go. You can't achieve these decisive points. along the line of operations. Next slide. What are you gonna protect? You're gonna protect all these things. Number one, you gotta protect the population. You can't protect the population, you're in trouble. If you can't protect, and I use this term lovingly, the dog faces, right? If you can't protect the soldiers, then if you don't have a force, well, then you got another problem. If you can't protect the infrastructure, right? Anybody spent the winter in Ukraine lately? I haven't either, but I'm told it's cold and it's dark. We don't get cold and dark in Monterey. You know, I live up there on Spaghetti Hill. And the rental, the heater went out. And the rental company didn't give us a heater for like 3 weeks. You know what? No big deal. Open the windows, sun comes in. Ukraine, it's not that way. You take away the infrastructure. There's no food, there's no water, there's no heat, there's no power, there's no internet. Pretty soon you break the will of the people. So you got to protect it. Next slide. I was kind of amazed at some places in the Navy anyway. They don't teach the 4 pillars of missile defense. Well, we do now. At least you're being taught the 4 pillars of missile defense. These are things you must do. You must, if you want to achieve air superiority in the face of missile attack, you have to do these things. Number one, you want to do attack operations. We have this term in missile defense, it's called left of launch, right? So launch, and you look at a timeline. You want to take out all that stuff left of launch before they even launch, right? Because that way you don't have to worry about things like discrimination. Discrimination of targets is very, very difficult, right? That's why you need pulse compression. Pulse compression. In radar, you do attack operations, you go left of launch, you take them out there. The next thing you got to do is you got to make sure that if you can't take them out left of launch, the next thing you must do is do active defense. And that's what we're going to talk about. We haven't talked about here, the active defense, right? Missile against missile, surface to air missiles against their bad guys. Here's something you must understand about all this stuff. So we're kind of happy, right? We're sending all of these missiles to Ukraine. We're sending like RIM 7 Seapower missiles to Ukraine by the thousands. And we're also sending Sidewinder missiles by the thousands. That's really good. That's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Because you must have all the command and control to make sure that happens. If you don't have all that command and control to kind of knit things together, that integrated air and missile defense, you can expend a lot of ordnance and you'll take out some of the targets, but you expend too much. It's not very efficient. And then finally, you have to have this passive defense. Undoubtedly, you've been looking at the TV about what's going on over in Israel. You know, I've not yet been to Israel, but I'm told if you go to most of the cities, especially those that are near where the rockets fall, there's like a bomb shelter on every corner. That's passive defense. Like all you can do is hide, and all you can do is warn. Because you know how here, if we get a tornado warning, right? Tornado warning comes on your phone. We know about that. In Israel, part of passive defense is that national authorities send everybody a text message to say, hey, head for the nearest bomb shelter because missiles are inbound. That's passive defense. Next slide. Anybody here read Ukraine? Anybody at all? None? None? A little bit? A little bit? Okay, good. What's this say? Awesome.
Nice.
How'd you know that? Did you read before? Do you really understand?
I was waiting.
Good gracious. I think I'll just give you credit for see 4022 just based on that. International law. Golly, yeah, it says death to the Russian occupiers. And this one, of course, up here says Franken-SAM. Everybody, a lot of people in Ukraine know about Franken-SAM. I'm nervous now. Now I got a guy who's from Ukraine, like, oh God, I can't tell the stories. But it all is about Franken-SAM. Next. And so undoubtedly, you've heard we're sending a lot of stuff to U.S. is sending a lot of stuff to Ukraine. And kind of the important thing for you to know if you're not familiar, like what exactly are we sending to Ukraine? If you go to this link right here, you got to go to the internet, but that tells you exactly what we're sending. I mean, down to the individual rounds of ammunition and that kind of stuff. So you can do that. Next slide. This, at least for integrated air missile defense, this is the innovation, ladies and gentlemen. This is the innovation. And the reason why it's innovative is because this is not like we're going into laboratories to make magnetrons. This is not like we're going down there to Sandia Labs or some other place to make the nuclear bomb. You're like, hey, we have 2 years and we got to come up with a nuclear bomb. No, 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 no. The innovation here is using what we have, right, in the magazines of America. Because we advance, we make all these weapons, but then we don't throw them away. Pretty smart. We just kind of keep them there, like build them, spend billions of dollars for them. Let's not throw them away hastily. The things we have not thrown away specifically are things like this. The AIM-9 Sidewinder. We have not thrown away the RIM-7 Seapower missiles. And we haven't thrown away Patriot missiles either. This Patriot. Haven't thrown them away. Here's a little bit of the problem with Patriot, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. And you know what? Ukrainians did not throw away a lot of their Soviet stuff. But the practical problem is this. In the early days of the war, they expended a lot of their ordnance. I mean, a heck of a lot of their ordnance. Guess what? There's no more ordnance left. So the problem is, okay, we've got the launchers, we've got the radars. So now what do we do about that? And the answer is maybe we can ask the Americans. Maybe they got some good stuff. They never throw their stuff away. That's the case. Next slide. Franken-SAM. Franken-SAM, you know, it's Franken-SAM difficult, very, very difficult to figure out, you know, who the father of that success was. You know, the thing about success has many fathers or mothers. Because if you look at the internet, it's like, oh, the United States invented it. If you look at other stuff, the Ukrainians said, ha, we should take all this stuff and cobble it together. It's difficult to understand who really came up with this. But one thing's for sure, the Ukraine is working it, and so is the United States. Franken-SAM. The first part, there's like 3 parts of Franken-SAM. Part number 1 is, hey, here's what we'll do. Which we got a ton of them. Can you go back a slide? Yeah. Back a slide.
I know.
That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. What? So why they find it? The thing I'm trying to tell you is, you remember that initial slide where I said, "Hey, here's all this good stuff we didn't throw away," and you saw the missile launcher for the Seapower, and the missile launcher was on a ship, and it was painted gray. And then when you fast forward and you take a look at the buck launcher, what they did was they got rid of the top part of it with the launcher. And they put Seapower missile canisters on top of it. And so now what we're doing is marrying this up. But so that's Franken-SAM number 1, right? You marry Sparrow missiles together with their Soviet era buck launchers, which also have radar on it. And the reason why the radar is kind of important is because those of you know, Seapower missile is a semi-active homer. Semi-active homer, right? So if you're unfamiliar, you know, the semi-active homer, you know, there's the target up there at the exit sign. And I want to put my ordnance on the target. Well, how am I going to guide it? The way I'm going to guide it is I'm going to illuminate it with my radar, and then that radar goes up there, it bounces off, and then it hits the missile, which has a receiver in it, and then the missile kind of homes in that way. Right? Semi-active homer. When you hear the cheers that the U.S. is sending all these missiles over Ukraine, that's kind of good. But you need to be critical thinkers about this, and you need to be technically aware of the fact you can send the missile, but if you don't have that illumination radar that works on the same frequency as the missile receiver, you really can't fire the missile all that accurately. So send the missiles, yeah, that's part 1. Part 2, you need engineers to make sure that the frequency of that buck launcher radar is the same frequency that's compatible with a Seapower missile, right? A lot of engineering involved in this. Let's go to the next slide and take a look at it. On this next slide, well, we also got a bunch of Sidewinder missiles. And the great thing about Sidewinder, anybody know about Sidewinder? And it's a seeker, Sidewinder missile. Yeah, it's heat seeking. Yeah. It's an IR seeker. It's an IR seeker. So if the target has a big heat signature, you know, it just goes into the or the target signature. It's hot. You don't have to worry about the semi-active homer. You see where this is getting innovative? We supply the missiles. We kind of put it on a launcher. You know, I don't know, about the only person in this room who's old enough to recognize this picture is Colonel Pugh. Oh, sorry, sir. I don't know either, and I was around when this happened. I think it's Desert Storm.
Yeah.
I think it's a Desert Storm. I actually remember this picture with all the duffel bags on there. But what's this tell you? It tells you, and this is why the internet's kind of rough right now, because I couldn't determine. But I think they put it on this launcher, right? So that's one way of putting the missiles on the launcher. That's good. Let's go next slide. There's another way, and there's a new and improved launcher. It's called NASAM or NASAM, National Advanced Surface to Air Missile System. It actually before was called the Norwegian Advanced Surface to Air Missile System. And look, it's new and improved, right? The box launcher looks better. It's a paint job is good. This is Sentinel radar. The only reason why that Sentinel radar is there is to kind of do the situational awareness, tactical picture kind of thing, right? You don't need that to do the semi-active homing that the Sparrow missile did. So now we've got the launcher, we've got the radar, we got the missiles. How innovative is that? You know, we're going to put all these pieces together. And the good thing about this is we don't have to have that frequency matchup, right? Because it's a different kind of guidance system. Let's go next slide. Franken-SAM 3. Now, this is another case of, you know, it's difficult to determine on the internet what really Franken-SAM 3 is. Because remember the picture I had up there of the Hawk missiles? I had Hawk missiles up there. Hawk missiles were from the Cold War. The Army had them. I think the Marines had Hawks as well. And then the Soviet Union went away and we declared victory, and you know, we kind of benefited from the peace dividend. We kind of put all that stuff away, but we didn't throw it away. Now we still got it. So depending on which article you read, Franken-SAM 3 may be Hawk missiles we have from the Cold War, or it may be Patriot. But I have to point out a couple things about Patriot. We've heard about Patriot for a long, long time. Right? Remember Patriot in the first Gulf War. We heard about Patriot in other places. We've got lots of Patriot batteries right now in the Middle East. As we progress, as we evolve, the missiles get better and better and better. The current missiles that we use are not the missiles that were given away. Right? We've got this missile segment enhancement for Patriot PAC-3, highly sophisticated. The missiles were given away, kind of like the older missiles. We got plenty of those older missiles. And guess what? So do all the other allies and friends and partners of Ukraine. They got a lot of these missiles. The problem is, you see all these things here, like the old, this is the MPQ-53 radar. It's a PISA radar, not an AESA radar. Those of you who are scholars will appreciate that. It's an older radar. It's an older engagement control station. You know, all that stuff, though, it's not ready for prime time. So you see the practical problem. The idea is we want to kludge the weapons together with the sensors, command and control, but not necessarily. We don't have all these things. So this is a little problematic right now. So be careful. Be critical thinkers. When you hear the stuff on the news reports, know that there's some other stuff that needs to be done. It might be system engineering that might be done. It might be electrical engineering, missile engineering that has to be done. Doesn't mean it's not a good story, but that's the rest of the story. Next slide. Oh, any other countries? They're helping out too. It turns out that the Germans have some really good stuff. Really good stuff. It is this infrared imaging system, tail and thrust. I don't know, you probably recognize it already based on having attended the first 35 minutes of this lecture. You see this seeker up there. It's an infrared homing seeker. That's pretty good. So Naval Postgraduate School, we're getting ready to think about combat system for the ships that we need to have in the South China Sea. Maybe we should be turning on our radar. You know? Maybe we should be turning on a 5 megawatt radar that constantly broadcasts, "Here I am, come kill me." Maybe we should go passive. Maybe we should shift to seekers, a lot more seekers that are infrared homing seekers. You don't have to worry about all that semi-active homing stuff. Maybe I can pick you up. The other thing too is remember I talked about that a drone that comes from Iran, slow, not being fat, easy target, that you don't want to expend $5 million missile on. That's where the Gebhard comes in. This thing was like built in 1960 and it's been continuously upgraded over the many decades. Fires 35 millimeter rounds of ammunition, a lot cheaper than missiles. And a lot more appropriate for low, slow, close in drones that you like to knock out of the sky. And the French are in it too. Don't try to make any sense out of this acronym using English. You're smiling because you probably know it's in French. In French, like surface air missile, something Frenchy stuff. But anyway, so the French are in and French are helping. Next slide, please. What the heck does all this stuff have to do with the Navy and Marine Corps? I mean, really, right? It's a land war. I don't think I might have mentioned ship once, but not much. It didn't say DMO, it didn't say EABO, because we're here at the Naval Postgraduate. So let's see what it has to do with the Navy and Marine Corps. Okay, next slide. Remember I said there was a reason why the font was bold, blue, darker, so it stood out. Well, we've arrived at that point in the lecture to know why. Because remember we said the only one of the things that really contributed to achieving the strategic objective of survival, the nation of Ukraine, was that, hey, you know what, they got smart. They dispersed, they were mobile, deception. For those of you who know what the Navy's principal warfighting concept is, do you know what it is? Navy's principal warfighting concept. Yeah, of course it's distributed maritime operations. Write this one down. Make sure, because you could be the apostles and the disciples of Navy warfighting. The Navy's principal warfighting concept is distributed maritime operations. And the kind of fundamental thing about distributed maritime operations, it's not your father's, it's not your mother's naval warfare anymore. It's different warfare. And it requires distribution, integration, and maneuver. Distribution, integration, maneuver. You know, have you already done the thing like DIM? Like, how am I going to remember this after I leave Hammer's lecture? Just remember DIM, distribution, integration, maneuver. Now, take a look at this. Distribution, integration, maneuver. Does that sound kind of naval? Look, the point is here in warfare, right? You learn this in JMO, right? The nature of war. What's significant about the nature of war? It never changes. The nature of war never changes. It's always chaotic. It's always tragic. It's always a waste of the nation's blood and treasure. But character war changes all the time. Changes all the time. This stuff is kind of like in the business of the nature of war. Like spreading out is good. Spreading out is good. Why be a target? Putting all your ships in one place. Lessons to be learned from the Ukrainians. Too many targets, too few missiles over too short a period of time. Can't be decisive. Can't be shock and awe. Not shock and awe. There's no shock and awe over the nation of Ukraine because it's so big and has so few missiles. Layered defense, defense in depth. And you do that. Remember all those capabilities we had? First, we had like the Patriot, long range. Then you kind of come in a little bit more, and then you're using like the RIM 7, Sea Sparrow missiles. Okay, next. Then you come in another one, and that's where you're using Gepard, right? Close-in systems, right? 35 millimeter Gatling gun is. Here's where you got to have the big picture, right? Remember we said stockpiles of dumb gravity bombs in the Soviet Union? I don't know, maybe they're piled as high as the Ural Mountains. But if you can't deliver the ordnance, if you can't deliver it, then they are of not much use. Boy, Ukrainians chief air defense officer, pretty smart guy. Let's use defense in depth. Let's make sure that their bombers don't get to us. That way they can't use a lot. Oh, and the only thing they got left are like S-300 surface to air missiles, which really aren't designed. They just are not designed to go up against things like power plants, apartment buildings, schools, hospitals. Hey, the Ukrainians doing pretty good.
Yeah, 10 minutes at the top of the
10
hour
minutes high.
for those that have a 1 o'clock point.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. We're almost there.
Awesome.
We're almost there. and they're doing a lot better. And the reason why they're doing a lot better intercepting cruise missiles, air launch cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, all these kinds of missiles. The reason is because things like Franken-SAM, things like assistance from their allies, their partners, coalition members, community of decency in the world. They're doing better. But they got to get even better. You've got to have integrated air missile defense because what already you know, you can have all the missiles in the world, but if they are not well integrated, right? If they are not well integrated, then you end up expending a lot more ordnance than you really have to, right? Overkill. You got one target out there, and you're sending like 6 missiles at it. Like everybody's firing. Like everybody wants to get the fitness report bullet, right? I knocked down. So it was Russian missile. You can't do that because there's just not enough ordnance. The good deal is that the stockpiles of Russian missiles going down, right? Because you think we have trouble making missiles, right? With all this supply chain we have, but the resources we have, man, what's it like in Russia right now? It's very, very difficult. That's one of the reasons why they're buying from the Iranians or getting stuff from the Iranians. One of the reasons why they're probably going to get stuff from North Korea. So their superiority is an important thing for survival and achievement of strategic objectives. Next slide. Oh, that's it. Okay, that's it. That's all I got. And in time. All right. So thank you very much for your attention. I know this was fast paced. It's kind of like going to the department at school. So for those of you who are not in the Meyer Scholar program and you like to drink out of the fire hose, well, this was like at the department at school. But you can diminish that rate of flow. You go to the Meyer Scholar program, enroll in PC 4022, Naval Combat System Engineering. We talked about a lot of these things. All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
So, hey, thanks, John. Yeah, a lot of deep thoughts with Randy Pugh that I wrote down in my book that I'll talk to you about later. We share notes. So this was number 3. Number 4, we've got Professor Wenchel Lan is coming in 2 weeks. She's going to talk about the use of commercial space in Ukraine. So obviously, everyone's heard of Starlink and the use of Starlink as a command and control network, but also things like commercial imagery and how commercial imagery plays into that. So Wenchel Lan in 2 weeks. And then sometime in February, our next opportunity to do one of these will be, I think, the last one, and that will be electronic warfare. So electronic warfare support, attack, and protect in Ukraine, which should also be probably the best of the series because I'll do it. So that's joking. So thanks very much for your attention. If you have follow-on questions, you can poke them in a chat. You can send them to John, but appreciate your attendance and your interest in this topic. Thank you. Great. Perfect. Love it.
Yeah.
You can share my question for me.